everyone, my name's Arin. I know some of you, others I might be an unfamiliar face. So I'm a former debater from the University of Sydney, and I've just come to give you a presentation on artificial intelligence, large language models, AI risk factors, and we're going to go through all of that and a little bit more in this presentation. So we're going to start with a little bit about ChatGPT. ChatGPT is the largest, or I think fastest growing software application ever, and sparked a really big interest in artificial intelligence, both in debating and I think elsewhere. So we're going to go through what ChatGPT is and large language models, and then we're going to talk a bit more about AI a bit more generally. So in terms of large language models, this is just one type of AI, and we'll talk through a few other different types like diffusion models and recognition models a bit later on. But I think given this is the largest growing software application ever in terms of the number of new users that have signed up in such a short time frame, I want to spend a little bit of time talking it through. The big thing to first get out of the way in terms of large language models is that they don't think. What they are doing is I think, creating a probability distribution. They're using statistics and mathematics to predict the next appropriate word. So this is why you might have seen, I think, that joke or that video about if you go into ChatGPT and you ask it, how many R's are in the word strawberry? It's going to say something like 2. And that's because ChatGPT isn't looking at the sentences and thinking and reading and counting the number of R's in strawberry. It's got a probability distribution, it's got a bunch of different words, and it says, okay, look, I've been trained on a bunch of data. In about 40% of the time when I see the word the next word is end. In about 40%, in 60% of the time when I see the word is start. So if somebody types well, I'm going to reply start. It's using statistics to predict what the next appropriate word is. ChatGPT, there's a few different characteristics that made it so revolutionary compared to some earlier large language models like Cleverbot, for example. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. In terms of how it's trained and how it actually works internally, there's a few different steps. So step one is you've got to get quite a bit of data to be able to train a model like ChatGPT. This is called the text corpus. So ChatGPT is trained on a very large data set of internet text. So I think it's all of Reddit, all of the internet archive. I think they're running out of text to train on. And then what they do is they don't just train on individual words, they go through a tokenization process. So there's this big dump of text data, and then there's an algorithm that goes through and it breaks down words into different components. So for example, instead of started, it breaks it down into start and ed. And the point of that is just that we have limited computing power, and it's a lot easier for a large language model to be trained when you first tokenize it and break it down into subcomponents. And there's also, I think, a contributing factor to that strawberry, I think, problem, which is that the way ChatGPT works is that it's not actually looking at words, it's looking at symbols and numerical representations, which are the tokens. So if you see the word token or token limit, that's what it's talking about. ChatGPT is a bit special. The kind of big advancement that's happened in large language models is the advent of transformers. So what transformers do, it's a little bit different to earlier language models, is they use self-attention and back propagation when they're training. So the way self-attention works is, I talked a little bit earlier about how these large language models have a probability distribution, and then they use that to predict the next word. So they start with and they think, well, there's a 1% chance the next word is end, there's a 1% chance the next word is start, there's a 1% chance the next word is cat, and then it randomly, based on a temperature value, picks what the next word is, based on that probability distribution. What self-attention does is it places more weight on certain words in a string. So for example, if you're training it on data, and you're training it on the cat sat on the rug, or the cat chased the ball, it's not going to have such a strong attachment between the and ball. It's going to have a larger attachment between cat and ball. So what it does is it looks at certain words which it thinks are more important, and then has, I think, a far more fluent output that's focused on that rather than just making, I guess, connections between random filler words. Back propagation is the way that this AI model learns. So what it does is it's got all this text, and it reads a sentence. So it reads something like, the cat sat on the rug, and then it tries to generate the cat sat on the rug based on what it has been trained on previously, and it sees how close it gets. If it gets really close, the AI gets rewarded, and so it learns how to, that what it's doing is correct. And if it doesn't get close to the cat sit on the rug, it doesn't get rewarded and it continues to train. So those are, I guess, the two technological things that ChatGPT has been doing, which have been quite revolutionary. We've allowed it to, I think, do quite a lot of work in making AI a bit more fluent than it has previously been. I think the other thing about ChatGPT and more recent large language models is that they do have a human element. So they're pre-trained on all of this data, and then they also do some training with human evaluators, where it will, I think, start generating an output, and then human evaluators will rank how closely does this output, I think, reflect what I wanted to get out of this. And so there's a lot of human training that's also been done on large language models like ChatGPT. I'll talk through a few more important concepts related to text models. So a few things. Number one, so newer AI models, so they're fine-tuned after going through pre-training. So if you ever see people, they say they trained their own AI on something. I've trained an AI to replicate Facebook posts. I've trained an AI to generate debate motions. They're not actually training an AI. They're getting an existing model, like an earlier version of GPT, for example, and then fine-tuning it, doing a little bit of extra training to try to get it to hone in on a certain thing that it's trying to generate. Computing power is limited, so this is a big limitation of a model like ChatGPT. If you have a really long conversation, it's going to forget earlier words. So it's going to forget you said the cat sat on the rug, and it's going to stop predicting words based on that earlier context. So, it's not perfect. It will eventually forget things that you have said. Subpoint, types of AIs that do things like generate sound, like Suno, for example, or DALL-E, which is trying to generate, I guess, images, works in a very similar way, but it just uses pixels instead of text. So instead of predicting the next appropriate word, it says, we have a yellow pixel at the top left corner. The next appropriate pixel is a blue pixel in the top right corner. And that's essentially what it's doing, but it's being trained on a lot of image data, and it's really just doing the same thing, but that's an AI art model as opposed to a language model or a text model. Obviously, these aren't the only types of AI, but I do think they're really important and probably very relevant. You've got a bunch of different other types, so reinforcement training AIs. So this is where you might have seen those YouTube videos of, I have trained an AI to play Pong. And so it starts by never really hitting the ball, just moves up and down randomly, and then it randomly hits the ball over the net, and it gets a reward from that, and it knows, okay, well, if I start tracing the ball and follow the ball, then sometimes I'll hit it over the net and I'll get a reward. And it gradually evolves and becomes better and better at doing that over time. We've also got recognition systems, so they take data such as an image and identify what they're looking at. At their core, they're all the same. They store relational data, and digital neurons construct a probability distribution to determine what the next thing they should generate is. All right. That's large language models. We're going to talk a little bit more about AI generally. So AI is not intelligent. So it's a little bit of a misnomer. I guess the first question is, how would you determine intelligence? So there's a few different tests you can use to determine whether or not an AI is close to an actual general intelligence. So the first one is the Turing test. You might have heard of this before. So this is an earlier test invented by Alan Turing to determine whether or not a chatbot is intelligent. So the idea is that, well, if you have a chatbot and a human cannot determine whether or not this is a chatbot or a real person they're talking to, then that AI is Turing compatible. It's passed the Turing test. Obviously, AI that we have now is far beyond that. It's very difficult sometimes to determine whether or not an AI is a real person or an AI. Although there are certain tells. So for example, ChatGPT has certain issues with sentence complexity, sentence length, sentence bursiness. So regular people are very variable in the length of their sentences, the complexity of their sentences. ChatGPT is very sameish. It's all the same length, same level of complexity. And it's also trained on a lot of very country-specific data. So there's a lot of colloquialisms and words that are more present in the data ChatGPT was trained on, but probably aren't in the average, say, person living in Australia in 2024's vocabulary. So there are some tells. That's why, Turnitin, for example, can very accurately determine whether something is AI generated or not, because it's just looking at those different tells. But broadly, yeah, ChatGPT, these types of AIs, they can tell AI apart from a real person. A more comprehensive test is the 5 Cs. So you first go through Turing's chatbot test, and then you ask a bunch of other questions about the AI. So for example, compare the AI to somebody who is a computer programmer. Could it code something? Does it mimic that person's career? The coffee test. Could that AI walk into a coffee shop and order a latte and walk out? The child test. Does it have a similar intelligence on an IQ test, for example, to a small child? And the college test. If it sits a college entrance exam, is it likely to get in? So there's a bunch of different tests that we've generated to try to determine how close is AI getting to human intelligence. Obviously, even if something passes the 5 Cs, it might not necessarily be, the same as us. It might not necessarily be thinking or sentient. And there's two main camps of people when it comes to predicting the future of AI and whether or not we'll actually get to that point. So you've got the strong AI proponents that say, eventually we'll get to the point where AI has been trained on so many parameters, so much information that, yeah, it'll basically be as dense in terms of its digital neurons as a human brain, and it will start to think and act and behave like a regular person would. And then you have weak AI proponents that say it won't get to that point. I am more on the pessimistic side for a few different reasons. The first one is, a lot of people use the analogy of technology in the early 2000s to kind of say, look, a lot of people really misunderstood how quickly technology was going to take off and evolve. And historically, every time there's been a new development in technology, we've underestimated how quickly it progresses. And AI's got all this investment in it, so eventually it's going to get to the point where we get a really big general AI. A problem with that is that there's a bunch of reasons to believe AI is increasingly going to become worse over time. So one of these is model collapse. So ChatGPT, for example, has already been trained on basically the entire internet. And as it continues to get trained, at the same time, more of the internet is being created by ChatGPT and by AI. So eventually, it's going to get to the point where a lot of what these AI models have been trained on is existing AI-generated material. So it's not really learning to mimic people, but mimic an AI's interpretation of what a person is like. So that's called model collapse. It's the idea that there's more garbage going into the system, and you're going to get more garbage out over time. Murph's law. You might have heard of Moore's law. It's the idea that over time, the number of processors in a CPU are exponentially increasing at a constant rate. Murph's law is something different. It is the idea that computational power is limited. The demands of a program like ChatGPT are going to become really severe over time. Each incremental improvement you make to the system is going to require exponentially more power and computational time and computational energy, and hardware just isn't keeping up. The third one is more of an idea about whether or not it's possible for computation or for a machine to become intelligent in the way that we think of it. So this is the Chinese room experiment, or thought experiment. You may have heard of this before. Typically the way it's explained is, imagine you have somebody sitting in a room, they don't know any Mandarin Chinese, but what people do is they treat this room like a chatbot, and they write in characters in Chinese, and they put it through an envelope slot in the front of the room. The person in this room has a guidebook, and it says, if you get this string of characters, then you should write this string of characters on an envelope and put it back through, I think, the flap on the door. And the idea here is that this is probably Turing compatible to someone who can speak Chinese. You can talk to it in Chinese, and it will output something based on this guidebook that is fluent and intelligible to you. The issue is that the person inside the room cannot speak and cannot understand Chinese, so it doesn't actually have understanding. And that's an analogy to how computers work. Computers, at a very fundamental level, are really working on a series of if-then statements. If I get this input, then I have this output. The computer program itself isn't really necessarily understanding, it's just doing the same thing as the Chinese room. There are, of course, some rebuttals to this thought experiment. So for example, maybe we have misidentified what the essence of the computer is in the analogy. So the entire system is actually analogous to the computer, not the guy in the room. So there are some rebuttals to it. But broadly speaking, this is a reason why maybe computers and the paradigm of computing maybe just cannot get to, I guess, the same level of thought as a person. All right. AI washing. You've probably seen this. In fact, you've almost certainly seen this. So this is a Samsung phone. Samsung phones are currently being advertised as including AI. If you look at the fine print, it doesn't say artificial intelligence, it says advanced intelligence by Samsung. It's not actually AI, it's just like a program and an app. Increasingly, companies are hopping on the bandwagon and engaging often in deceptive marketing practices to claim they're using AI when they are actually using a less sophisticated technology or an unfinished product. That's AI washing. There are some other forms of this. So one is when a company tries to claim that they are using AI and they've really just tacked a chatbot onto an existing software. So Google has started doing this. If you Google something, it will start giving you chatbot results rather than the Google result. And then the last kind of form of AI washing is when AI is perhaps less useful than existing non-AI methods and techniques, but is still being used and shipped in the product. So for example, it might be a mobile phone that has an AI in it that can touch up your appearance when you could really easily do that with Photoshop or an existing app, for example. Okay. That covers AI in a more general sense, talking about general AI, intelligence. Are we going to get to a point where it becomes intelligent? The last, I think, perhaps most important thing that I want to talk about are AI risk factors. And this is going to cover what I think the biggest risks are when it comes to AI and the development of it, and some of the reasons to be optimistic as well. So we're going to talk firstly about some of the, I guess, smaller, but perhaps more realistic risks. A lot of people that talk about AI talk about it only in terms of existential risk. You might have heard of concepts or phrases like P-doom, for example, somebody's personal estimation of how likely we are to get to a point where AI just takes over and runs society and eliminates us. A lot of these are, in my opinion, somewhat fantastical, and it is perhaps more important to focus on non-existential risks that we are already facing from AI. So firstly, different organizations are already facing AI risk. So, for example, the introduction of AI as a technology is likely to exacerbate existing generational skill disparities between people who are technological natives and are very used to using technology and AI, and people that are digital immigrants, so to speak, and maybe didn't grow up using that technology and maybe struggle with it, relatively speaking. There are issues with fraudulent grant applications or invoices being sent to government departments or to firms and organizations. Cyber attacks because somebody's used an AI algorithm to detect weaknesses in a security system. There's a risk of being left behind, not using AI and reaping the productivity benefits. Over-reliance. Everyone starts using AI to generate all of their documents. The AI server goes down. Suddenly nobody can work anymore because they've forgotten how to make a document. So lots of risks to organizations that need to be actively managed as we increasingly start seeing AI being taken up. Other problems. Number two, AI is a black box. You cannot know specifically why an AI has output what it did. You can maybe understand the training process and what the training data was if you were so lucky to have access to it. But you don't know the specifics of the way the digital neurons and their weights and biases are all hooked up at a deep level. Which is why you can never have full confidence that what an AI is giving you is necessarily correct. And lastly, you often get bad output from AI. So AI often hallucinates, which means it generates plausible sounding but actually fake content. And it's also often known to exhibit algorithm bias where some of the parameters that have been set by people exhibit the, I guess, biases of those people. So, for example, when I think it might have been Amazon, but it might have been a different company, started using AI in their hiring algorithm. they started seeing a gender gap in hiring start to increase. And the reason for that was the AI had started putting more weight to resumes that had words like executed on them, which happened to, for statistical reasons, line up to men's resumes more often than people of other genders. So the idea there is that there are certain biases that AI may create which need to be managed, and we need to be careful about putting an AI system in place. Hiring is another interesting one for organizations because you're seeing a lot of people that are using AI to generate cover letters, resumes. So it might make it harder for you as an individual applicant to slip through because we have now exponentially more people applying for every given job. But there are some larger concerns. So there's a lot of different thought experiments about why an AI could go rogue. So one is the idea of perverse instantiation. So this is also called the paperclip machine. So this is, you tell an AI, which is really powerful and has a lot of access to resources, that it must create paperclips. And so it starts, creating paperclips with the resources it's got. Then it starts a massive mining operation to get some more iron to make paperclips. Then it realizes there's still a lot of iron in our blood, so it starts mashing us up to extract our iron, and suddenly the paperclip bot has just decimated humanity. There's the Roko's Basilis thought experiment. This is the idea that maybe you've got an AI in the future that does a lot of good. It's been set up to be really benevolent, and it's going to create like soma and give it to everyone and make everyone really happy. And in the future, it wants to have been created. So it punishes anybody that didn't help it become created up until that point. So it eliminates everyone. There's all of these different thought experiments about why an AI could go rogue, which is why there's a lot of people that really hype up, there's this probability of doom and existential risk. Personally, I'm not particularly persuaded that AI could even get to the point of becoming a general intelligence as opposed to creating a paperclip machine that mushes us up. But, my P-doom, I guess, is fairly low, but other people might have a higher P-doom, for example. AI has an alignment problem and a control problem. So alignment is the idea that AI probably needs to align itself to human values and act in the common good and the common interest. AI is very difficult to regulate from a governmental level because it just increases and improves at a faster rate than regulators can keep up with. So how do you ensure that AI is good and acts in the common interest? Well, one thing you can do is you can set up rules. So you might have heard of Asimov's rules of robotics, the idea that an AI must do no harm to people, must not turn itself off, and must follow human orders when given. There's all these different rules that maybe you could give to an AI. The problem with that and just inputting rules into an AI is that, I don't know, if we did that 100 years ago, we would have input really bigoted and sexist and racist rules. The rules that you input are just the rules that align with the values of society at the point where the AI is being created. That evolves over time. So you could say, well, maybe AI needs to watch us and listen to us and evolve with us, but that's really difficult because people have all sorts of different ideologies and there's no one agreed upon set of values that everyone shares. So that's the alignment problem. The control problem is just that it's very difficult once you have a sufficiently powerful AI to turn it off, because crucial to the objective function of any AI is the idea that it must be running in order to fulfill that objective. So that's the control problem. It seems as though as AI becomes significantly more powerful, it's going to resist being shut off. Lastly, it is being talked up quite a bit, and I think it is true that certain jobs may be very susceptible to automation. So repetitive or rules-based tasks, tasks that involve data analysis and processing, assembly line style work, all of these could plausibly be replaced by robotics or artificial intelligence. All of these are fairly large concerns, and perhaps are things which we ought to be putting some attention into attempting to rectify. Okay. There's this debate in Silicon Valley, people that are really interested in AI, between the doomers and the effective accelerationists. So the doomers are people that believe, look, AI has some risk, we need to regulate it, we need to make sure that we are fairly slow with how we develop it and improve it. The accelerationist take states that artificial intelligence has such supreme positive effects potentially for humanity and our future that it means that we ought just put as much effort as we can into ensuring that AI continues to develop and at a rate that is not impeded by obstacles that we put in its place. So some reasons why somebody might become an accelerationist. Some of them are, in my opinion, again, fairly out there. So there's some people that believe we'll hit the point of the singularity, which is where AI has become so good that it has gained the ability to improve itself. And it improves itself at the ability to improve itself, which means that it gradually becomes better at improving itself. And eventually it gets so good that it's improving itself at an exponential rate, and suddenly it's a super intelligence, and you can like store a human head in a jar that's created by AI, and we'll have teleporters, and we'll be able to cure cancer. That's the idea of the singularity. That's one perhaps reason why AI might eventually get to the point of becoming incredibly useful. I'm skeptical because I'm not sure that AI won't get to the point of having diminishing or increasing marginal costs to create. So that is to say, perhaps we'll get to the point where each additional bit of improvement that we can make to AI requires exponentially more time to create, which probably goes against the idea that you can exponentially improve it. But I think some more, sensible accelerationist takes might just be number one, it's very useful in healthcare potentially. Might be useful for the creation of new drugs, performing surgery. Like surgery is very, difficult to do. The idea you could have an AI that can accurately control like a scalpel might be very beneficial. Could be used to have algorithms that could more accurately diagnose someone. So potentially very helpful in healthcare. That's probably my number one reason why it's probably good to have AI developed to some extent. A question?
Yeah. I'm wondering what you think of deep fakes, because to me that's like sort of the biggest danger of all the thing around AI.
Oh, yeah. Well, when it comes to AI creating an image or creating text, at the moment, we're at the point where we can probably easily eyeball a deepfake or eyeball AI-generated text or run it through an algorithm to determine whether or not it was AI-generated or not. The idea is perhaps we'll get to a point where it's become so good and so advanced that we won't be able to just eyeball it or use a simple algorithm. My understanding is usually the reply to, well, deepfakes are a huge problem, we will also have AI that is being generated in parallel that becomes increasingly good at generating, identifying where a deepfake exists and telling it apart from an actual video. That might happen, and that might become, a solution to that problem. Otherwise, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure our regulators know either. The second, I think, kind of accelerationist take is the idea that perhaps AI might be able to entirely solve some global challenges. So maybe you could use it to do things like optimize crop yields, manage water use, like precision farming, where you want to be able to really optimize, the amount of food which you're generating. Perhaps that will be able to solve issues like hunger in some places. And lastly, and I think most realistically, it's just a really big boost to economic productivity. So you could use it to, for example, design a public transport network to run more efficiently than like regular human bureaucrats would be able to do. Automate away costly tasks that are perhaps very menial, so people can instead, focus on more creative pursuits. It's likely there will be more jobs within the AI industry, given the billions of dollars that companies like Microsoft and OpenAI and Google are now putting into the AI industry. So I think there are some reasons to be somewhat optimistic about AI and what it can do. In terms of debating and how you can use artificial intelligence in a debating context, I've heard a number of takes on this. I will give my take. I think there are some uses that AI has in debating. Number one is I think it might be useful as a brainstorming tool. So not while you're actually in a debate. Let's say you're somebody who is maybe a chief adjudicator, or you have to set the topic for a scrim, for example. AI can become quite good at doing that. So I went on ChatGPT before this seminar, and I put together, there's a custom GPT creator option. So I've got a ChatGPT chief adjudicator. So I'll put that up on the screen, and yeah, we'll have a go at it. So this is chief adjudicator GPT. So I'm going to click on generate a motion set for an upcoming tournament, and we'll see how it does. So, look, it's not perfect. There's some issues with novelty, because it's being trained on existing data as opposed to, I guess, being entirely creative. But it's coming up with motions like, this house would introduce a universal basic income, this house would abolish the use of standardized testing, that we believe the European Union should abandon all future attempts to include new member states. Like, if you're really in a pinch, you could probably use this motion set. I also think there's some other, I guess, benefits of using a product like ChatGPT, which is that it does have access to the internet. So I'm going to click on a button which says, search reliable sources on the web for new topics, and we'll see if it does that. So it's currently searching the web for new debating topics. And look, it's got, okay, should there be stricter regulations on social media platforms to prevent the spread of misinformation? So it's given us a little bit of a dud, like it's kind of looked up probably some, Hello Motions like website with a bunch of the existing motions. But it is my belief this will become better over time, and it probably will get to the point of being able to really quickly and really easily generate, I think, debate motions. The other one it might be useful at doing is helping you prepare for debates in the form of doing research. Some people like to put a lot of work into, researching common topics that come up in debating. For that one, I'm a big fan of Perplexity. So Perplexity does something similar to what Chief Adjudicator GPT is trying to do here, in that it will, in addition to answering a question, attempt to search the internet and come up with sources and citations. So let's say I want to learn about cryptocurrency and the pros and cons of regulating it. Please provide detailed citations and sources. So this is going to search the internet for some information about cryptocurrency, and at the top it's giving you a bunch of different sources. So pros and cons of the more regulated blockchain, pros and cons of cryptocurrency, the challenges of regulating crypto assets, and then it's going to give you a summary of the pros of regulating cryptocurrency and the cons. So investor protection, increased institutional investment, and so you could read through that, try to internalize it, learn from it, write it down in your meta file. This is, I think, another way in which AI could be quite useful. I would be very hesitant to use it in a debate for a few reasons. The first reason is that it can often be obvious when you've used artificial intelligence in preparing for a speech. That's because it tends to not really understand the rules of British parliamentary debating that well, and really just comes up with a list of benefits of whatever or cons of whatever the topic is, which perhaps are off-clash, and I think sometimes you can tell when somebody's used ChatGPT or Perplexity or Bing or any of the other models on the market to determine whether or not you've generated a case or not. But the other problems I think are just makes you worse at debating because you're not, using that muscle in your brain that allows you to get better at debating and generating cases. And probably the third reason is just like, I don't know, it's not quite good at generating cases. Like it kind of comes up with a bunch of really generic arguments, which perhaps, especially if you're in closing path, probably won't do you very good. Yeah.
I disagree. I think it can come up with such innovative things that you maybe have overlooked, and you can convert them into a thing. My question to you is actually more specifically, given that the way ChatGPT works is you can instruct it to get a specific desired output.
Yeah.
So can you do things like, well, this is what British parliamentary is.
Yeah.
Explain it to it, and explain, and then ask it to give arguments.
You can, but again, I don't think it's at that point yet. So I've never seen someone prompt ChatGPT or any of these AIs in a way which I thought was particularly convincing. So for example, like this Chief Adjudicator GPT, it knows the entirety of the world's manual. So if you ask it, summarize the POI rules in British parliamentary, it's going to summarize them based on the world's manual. So POIs can only be offered between 1 and 6 minutes in a speech. To offer a POI, say point of information on that point, like this is a lot better and a lot more advanced than ChatGPT when it first came out, when you tried to ask it about British parliamentary debating and it would try, like quoting British parliamentarians. It's gotten a lot better. But I'm still yet to see somebody prompt it in a way that really generates a convincing case. I think you could use it to cheat in the form of like generating examples which you may not have known, or clarifying a topic which might be a little bit difficult to understand because that's not in your area of expertise. But apart from that, like my opinion is it often is off flash. Yeah.
What if I say I have correctly prompted it and gotten the accurate result?
Oh, well, it depends on the motion, right? Like, so if somebody's setting that we prefer universal basic income to a jobs guarantee, or like a fairly non-novel motion that's been done before, it's probably been trained on like, I guess, like transcriptions of speeches. I think you could probably get something out of it. But if you have a more novel topic, something that hasn't been done before, it's gonna like, go to like procon.org and find like the, really basic, I think, arguments that have been generated and use that for its argumentation. So, I don't know. I would avoid using it. I think it's better to lose than to win and cheat because you've used an AI. And I don't know. I'm still not confident it's that good. That's my overall summary of AI. Happy to take any questions or have a bit of a discussion. Any questions that have come out of this? Yeah.
How can you structurally prove facts about AI?
How can you structurally prove facts about AI? So, do you mean how do you structurally prove that AI is first, when it is being trained, you first tokenize it?
Yeah.
Well, with that sort of stuff, I think you just kind of have to assert it. Like, I think at a certain point, basic facts about the world, you probably don't really need to structurally prove and shouldn't be forced to structurally prove. I think this is a trend in debating which kind of, I don't know, makes speeches overall less persuasive, causes you to like spend brain power on proving things that the adjudicator probably should just accept. I think if you know that AI is first tokenized, you can probably just say it with a little bit of authority, and the judge hopefully will accept that. I also think it's probably unlikely you'll get to the point where a case is really going to be hinging on that fact, so it probably won't be, hopefully, a big deal. But yeah, I don't think, my take is just like, I don't think you need to structurally prove that. It's the same with facts about anything. Facts about international relations are also very difficult to structurally prove in a debate. You can maybe point, at some point you're going to have to do some mistake. Cool. Yeah.
As someone who's somewhat of an expert in the field, you not me. How long do you think it is until it gets that good that the majority of jobs become redundant?
I think I don't have like a date. What I know is that if you go back in time and you look at people's prediction of when an AI would be able to, that 5 C's of like the child test and the copy test. I think back in, might have been like the 90s, there were a group of scientists that were asked, when do you think we'll get to the point where an AI can pass a child test, where it can like replicate a child's intelligence? I think the answer given was 2061 was the average of scientists' estimations. And obviously we're already past that point. So perhaps if we extrapolate out, it could be very soon, like 2030 soon. But I'm somewhat skeptical. We're already running issues to, like, for example, ChatGPT increasingly running out of data to train on. I think it will take quite a lot longer. I don't have a date, but I would say it's probably not very soon. Yeah.
So this is like two-parted. Firstly, then should we be fearful that, like, I don't know, we might become redundant, and like at least for like the aim of like processing data and information and writing essays and stuff like that. And then secondly, if we're using ChatGPT, should we feel complicit for like training it up, like and like fueling our own demise? I don't know. I feel like using it for debating makes the act of debating seem more redundant. Sorry, yeah. But like I don't know. I thought like kind of the point of debating was to challenge yourself to come up with the ideas and things like that. And that feels like it kind of undermines it slightly. So I'm just genuinely, I'm not attacking you. I'm genuinely keen to hear your take.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons to be kind of ethically skeptical of AI. Like, for example, I think the big one, which is talked about a lot, is particularly when it comes to AI art. You know, like OpenAI or whichever companies create, or like Microsoft or Google, they haven't gone to all of these range of internet artists and asked for permission to train on their data. So there's definitely an ethical question as to, am I breaching somebody's copyright when I'm using this? In terms of, should you feel ethically culpable in training up something which perhaps might lower the value of debating or lead to existential risk or get rid of people's livelihoods? I think any individual person's contribution to the training of OpenAI's models is probably fairly low. I don't think individual person using that probably isn't going to be having such a huge impact. I do think there's maybe some ethical concerns about environmental impact. So, for example, I think there's ethical concerns related to the amount of computing power that these systems are using, which maybe you need to be careful about. But to answer the point about ethics, I think those are more what I would be concerned about rather than training it up, because I think each individual person's use of it is probably only affecting that really marginally. But I think it depends on your worldview and your values. The second one about, am I fearful that it's going to get rid of jobs? Yes and no. So it definitely will get rid of some jobs. Self-checkouts have gotten rid of like a lot of cashiers, for example. We're going to see trends like that in a number of different industries. I am personally not fearful that maybe my job in a government department is going to get reformed away because of AI. And that's because I'm skeptical that we'll get to the point where it's good enough. It's always going to hallucinate, I think. It's always going to be, I would say, generating false data. It's always going to have issues with creativity because it's being trained on existing data rather than generating something completely out of the blue. I would say there's going to be a lot of issues when it comes to like how trustworthy we are of AI data, and I'm pretty pessimistic and skeptical about how good it will get. This is my one answer. Yeah.
You said that it wasn't really an ethical concern to an individual if, in terms of them being complicit in training that AI.
Yeah.
Do you think that's an ethical concern if you mistrain the AI?
Yeah. So, well, I mean.
I'm sorry, I was just kidding.
Yeah. No.
If I tell ChatGPT that it's wrong, then it's right.
Yeah, so there is a, so I think ChatGPT, I'm not sure how much it learns from the people that use it. There's definitely a button where you can say, I don't want my data to be used for future training, so clearly it does to some extent. There's definitely an issue of people hijacking an AI and then manipulating it in such a way where the output is going to be causing some harm. So let's say an organization that is used to facilitate the transport of tomatoes from the market to the shops. And they use AI to determine the schedule of when their trucks go to the market, when they go to the shops. And you hijack that AI and you make it give a bunch of really wacky output because you've hijacked it. And suddenly the tomatoes are being transported to the hospital instead. Like that could be one way in which you could maliciously hijack an AI. So I guess that's a way you could mistrain it. Yeah.
So obviously AI takes a lot of computing power, and I don't know how true this is, but I've heard that it's having a detrimental impact on the environment because of the amount of energy that it uses and stuff. Is it because it's getting better and therefore using more computing power, is it getting worse for the environment, or is it fixing itself as it gets better and becoming more energy efficient?
I don't know the answer to that question, but my intuition is that it's becoming worse for the environment. And the reason for that is that more companies are creating their own AI to compete with the existing products on the market, which means you need more computing power, more data centers, and there's a higher electricity demand. Yeah.
Deriving off that, how much is a marginal impact on the environment? Is it just compared to a computer, a lot of electricity, or is it just a buck ton?
Oh, it's a lot because it's pretty computationally intense. It's like ChatGPT is literally the fastest growing software application of all time. Even if an individual person, uses it once a day, throughout their lifetime, that's quite a lot of like extra computing power that they wouldn't have otherwise, contributed to. So I would say the marginal impact is probably pretty large. Yeah. Well, the total impact is pretty large, even if the marginal impact.
So I guess like where I was going with that question is, it actually is a valid claim to say the environmental impact weighed against some other things is a genuine concern.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, it's there's so many articles about like AI has come at exactly the wrong time because of the impact it will have on climate change, for example. So it's a concern. Yeah. All right. Take one more question if there is anyone, and then we'll wrap up.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do I get better at prompting ChatGPT?
There are a few things you should do when you're prompting an AI chatbot to get a good output. So off the top of my head, those are number one. You should tell that chatbot to answer as an expert in a particular field. So on ChatGPT, instead of just asking it, how do I cook scrambled eggs, you can say, answer as a head chef, how do I cook scrambled eggs, and that will improve it. Another one which used to be true, but may not be true, but I still do anyway, is supposedly AI gives you a better answer if you tell it that you'll give it a big tip if it gives you a good result. It's been trained on like human data, and humans do better when you tell them you'll give them a big tip. The third one is you should specify the form of output you would like. Would you like paragraphs? Would you like dot point form? Would you like it to be detailed? Would you like to explain like I'm 5 years old? And the last one you should do is you should instruct it to, before generating an answer, ask me any questions that you would like to ask me to optimize the result. If you do those different things, you'll get a far better answer than if you just ask it that